All right, let's get into a little bit more of the Rams and Saints. It looked early on like the Saints were going to be in full control, but kind of like in the second game where the team that was in control just didn't have as big of a lead as you expected. The Saints had 2 red zone opportunities. They settled for a field goal first, and then there's an interception off a Todd Gurley drop where they settled for another field goal. So the Saints are up 6-0 while completely controlling the game. And I think, look, yes, the Saints got screwed on that last call, but, they had so many opportunities here. Not only after that call, they still had the ball in overtime. They're the only playoff team now to lose in overtime in the playoffs while winning the coin toss. So they've got that going against them. Sorry, Saints fans.
But even
early in the game,
talked about at some point. We'll get to that. The overtime rules.
Play defense.
They need to be changed. No, you can't.
Play defense.
You can't decide. You need to play defense.
We'll do it later.
When
we'll talk
the
later.
Entire league has gone the other way.
We'll talk the rules. Talk about the rules later. You're the one who doesn't care about fairness. You're just like, oh, a tie's a tie. I'm from Europe.
Right, but now you can't tie. Therefore, it needs to be fair.
Oh, jeez. Now it needs to be fair. Okay, so I think a big part of the Saints' issues, first quarter, when they're controlling the game and not coming away with points, and you could say, hey, it's the Rams' red zone defense, but there's an end zone drop. Mm-hmm. Breeze makes a nice throw up and away from coverage. That's dropped. Breeze, and the second time around, overthrow. They left a few plays on the table in the red zone that I think ultimately came back to bite the Saints.
Yeah, they left some plays on the table. I think defense played a much bigger part in this game than a lot of people were expecting it to. Both defenses stood up to be counted a little bit more than they did, certainly the first time they played. The Saints defense was helped a lot by the noise. Like, their home field advantage was definitely real. But the Rams clung on just enough early in this game to prevent it getting out of hand. And I think, again, we've seen this before, that the team that was trailing and getting in a hole was acutely aware of how bad that would be to get in that big a hole. So that fake punt was huge. The idea that the Rams felt they needed to pull that out to keep that drive alive and keep going and not sink that deep in,
right,
I think was a major decision, to realize that was the situation they were getting themselves into, and a major execution to get that to happen. Like Johnny Hekker,
what a weapon he is.
For a punter, he's got a pretty good pass on him, but Sam Shields needed to do something to make that work. Like, he caught the ball and was going to get tackled short and needed to make a guy miss to get that first down. That was pretty impressive.
Well, Shields was he was a wide receiver back at Miami in college, and what a weapon that is when you have Hekker with a 16 yards of depth away from the long snapper, and they run straight pass patterns. Mm-hmm. Most fake punts are like, oh, you left me wide open, just lob it in there. They run straight curl routes.
Yeah, they ran
with Hekker with some level of timing, and he's got to get it out. I mean, that is such a weapon. That's why he's got these gaudy passing numbers in his career. But that's again one of those little things that makes the Rams special. The thing we've said about the Rams and Saints all season, it does go beyond their offense. Both teams are capable of winning in multiple different ways, whether it's the run game, whether it's defense, whether it's back end in coverage, pass rush, but add special teams for both teams. Both teams have done. You've got Taysom Hill running trick plays for the Saints. You got the Rams doing it with Hekker. That's what makes these teams just those little extra, differences in these games.
Right, and we kind of said all along that defense won't be the reason that a team wins because, they dominate a game and suffocate a team like the 2000 Ravens or whatever. Right. But defense could be the reason that one of these teams wins because they show up at the right time or they fail to show up at the right time. And, both these teams, their defenses showed up at the right time in this game in certain situations. And then the other game was a story of the other defense just not being able to do it. The final drive in the AFC game, the Chiefs had 3 opportunities to stop them on third down.
Couldn't get it done long,
at all.
Right.
So, again, you're talking about at that point, that defense just needed to stand up one play, and they couldn't do it 3 straight times.
So for the Rams, if you look at their defensive grades, highest grade, Dante Fowler.
Playoff Sue
comes back again, but Dante Fowler had the highest grade at 79.5, including 4 pressures, and he's the one who hit Breeze on that interception in overtime. It was the second highest pass rush grade of the year for Fowler since coming over to the Rams back in Week 10. He did it against Seattle. So when we talk about these games, yes, Aaron Donald got a lot of attention, by the way. There was some plays I remember seeing 3 guys looking at Aaron Donald when they needed to. But when you have a guy like Dante Fowler step up because of that attention, that's what we've been saying about the Rams all season. It's Sue, it's Donald, but who's going to do it off the edge? Dante Fowler really stepped up in this game.
Right. When they traded for Fowler, it looked like one of those moves that could just be enough at some point to help them out in a big way, because he's a potential edge rusher in a way they haven't had anybody generating edge rush. And it's not like it's been consistent, and
right.
Fowler's been this immediate impact player and has helped them all the way down the stretch. But this is the kind of game, right? He has one of these games where he does show up. We get a sack, a hit, a couple of hurries. He has a big part in the entire game. And I'd say that was, it did push him over the edge. It went from being just Sue and Donald in the middle to suddenly you've got Dante Fowler actually stepping up and having a big game. And it makes all the sort of comments around that trade right. They may not have found a guy that's consistently this edge presence that they haven't had, but they found a guy that can do it in a game.
And so here's the other cat and mouse game that I thought was very interesting. You have Wade Phillips on one side, the Rams defensive coordinator, going up against this explosive Saints offense. You could tell early on, it reminded me a little bit of what the Eagles did the previous game, where they were really trying to just clamp down on the underneath stuff and make Breeze make plays over their head. So they did a pretty good job on the underneath stuff. But then it was Alvin Kamara on wheel routes. Every time Alvin Kamara had a mismatch against the linebacker, the Saints were targeting him. He had 13 targets. They weren't doing anything crazy. It's wheel route here. It's a little, two-way go. They were just targeting Kamara. He caught 11 of 13 targets for 96 yards. So that means Michael Thomas only had 6 targets.
Yeah.
Because they were just mixing and matching what they did against Thomas. But when he ran those crossers, they had their safeties come up and discourage the plays over the middle. When he did catch the ball, they did a good job keeping it in front and limiting the yak. But by the end of the game, so they did a nice job on Michael Thomas, and they said, okay, Kamara's killing us. So then they had plays where Sue's rushing off the edge, and he would pop Kamara. It's usually the other way around, right? The running back's usually going to bump the edge defender on the way out, slow him down. Instead, Sue is playing on the edge, and he's slowing Kamara out into his route. So they made a nice adjustment saying, look, we're not going to – Michael Thomas, we can't let him kill us. Now we're not going to let Kamara kill us. We'll let Ted Ginn and Traquan Smith and these other guys beat us. That was a really nice adjustment by the Rams to take Kamara out of just a couple plays here and there.
Yeah, they mentioned that, on the broadcast, that it's one thing to go into a game with these kind of adjustments and know that for a guy we need to slow him down. But the Rams did that in-game. It's like, okay, we've had enough of this. We need to actually do something to take care of Kamara, because when he gets one-on-one with the linebacker, usually Littleton, it's just not going to happen.
And by the way,
over.
The Patriots, we'll get to that, but the Patriots did that at halftime with Stephon Gilmore covering Travis Kelce. They switched to him over there too. So the in-game adjustments, Wade Phillips, the architect of the 2015 no-fly zone in Denver and all that stuff, and I think the Rams defense got a little underrated this year because when they didn't have Talib, they gave up a bunch. When they didn't have Talib, they got torched a lot, and I think it kind of lulled us to sleep. But if you go back to our preseason analysis of you have the best player in the NFL in Aaron Donald, you have Sue up front, and then you have very capable players in the secondary. Bringing in Talib and Peters, even though Peters has given up a ton this year, still dangerous. Talib, Peters, Roby Coleman, Josh Johnson in the back end, LaMarcus Joyner, they have some talents on the back end in the right places.
Right, and what was Roby Coleman, I think, was a huge part of this game, not just because of the the pass interference that wasn't called at the end, but so his coverage numbers are insane. Now, part of that is helped by the fact that, blown call that didn't get happen. And honestly, in this game, both teams, I think, were testing the officials in terms of what they're actually going to call. There were a bunch of pretty close calls that didn't get called and could have. But for the game, Roby Coleman's numbers are pretty insane. He was targeted 7 times, gave up 1 catch for 9 yards, and had 2 pass breakups. So his pass rating allowed was exactly the same as an incomplete pass.
Dropped interception, too.
Yeah.
That he should have caught. But
what was interesting is that he was their answer to Michael Thomas, because over the season, Michael Thomas has spent almost exactly 25% of his snaps in the slot, and which is actually, I think, less than you think it would be, because we know that he's become this devastating slot weapon. And a lot of times when they're in their toughest situations, he goes to the slot and he gets huge numbers. and become so valuable because of that. But only about 25% of his snaps this year from the slot. But in this game, it was up over a third. Again, not as much as maybe you thought it would be just looking at the game, but it was over a third of his snaps in this game were in the slot, which put him up against Roby Coleman a lot. Whereas before, the game plan was essentially Marcus Peters is going to follow Michael Thomas wherever he goes the first time they met. This time, Roby Coleman saw a ton of him. 3 of Roby Coleman's 7 targets were with Michael Thomas in coverage, and only gave up 1 catch in those targets.
Yeah, so we mentioned, I think, on the Sky, or at least I had it in my notes for the Sky broadcast, that I didn't necessarily say that they were going to track with Talib, but you're going to see more Talib and Thomas, and Roby Coleman was going to be key covering Thomas because of when he does move to the slot. So the Saints went from having some really good rhythm early on, exploiting every matchup. I mean, Breeze was sharp, and every time, as I mentioned, when Kamara had a linebacker on him, he found him. When Thomas was open, he found him. He found every single mismatch that he needed to find. But I really put a lot. You credit the Rams defense, but Breeze did not make plays in the fourth quarter or overtime. They had multiple drives to try to, seal the deal essentially in the fourth quarter. They couldn't do it. There was a pass interference. They couldn't do it overall, other than that one missed call, and then the overtime interception, which when the ball pops up, you don't know where it's going to go. But Breeze, as we always debate these plays as far as like what the grade is and everything like that. We usually absolve the quarterback if he gets hit, and he just has no clue, right? He gets hit, and it's the blocker's fault. I thought it was a very risky decision because Dante Fowler won his block. Fowler was right in his face, and Breeze made the calculated decision on 2nd and 16. I'm going to wind up and try to throw the ball. Now, the fact that the ball landed in Josh Johnson's hands and he adjusted and Michael Thomas didn't adjust to the ball, there's a little bit of luck involved there. But Breeze made the decision to try to throw the ball under duress, and that ended up costing them in overtime.
There's this fascinating dynamic between the pass rush and coverage in every defense and how they kind of relate to how the offense goes in games. That's really interesting to look at, and it kind of played out in different ways in both these two games. We talked all before about if you can only get one, do you want the elite pass rusher, do you want the elite corner? And obviously they work in tandem. And when the Vikings made that big trade for Jared Allen, there was all this talk about how the coverage is going to benefit a huge amount, because now suddenly you've got this elite pass rusher that's going to get the pressure to mean those guys don't have to cover for as long. And then the same thing on the back end, if you've got a guy that can shut people down for a huge period of time, it's buying the pass rusher a bit more time to get to the quarterback. So in these two games, and we've seen it with Breeze before when we were talking about the Eagles, in both those games, the same thing worked in different ways. The first game, the Eagles weren't able to hold up in coverage, so their pass rush couldn't get there because the ball was out of Breeze's hands so fast that they never had a chance. The second game, their coverage is better. They got more aggressive with the receivers, and Breeze had to hold the ball longer, so suddenly the pass rush was able to become a big part of the game again. And that again happened in this game. The Rams' coverage was way better than the first time. They were able to slow down those receivers to disrupt their release essentially into obvious passing lanes, and Drew Brees had to hold the ball longer. So his average time to throw in this game was 2.55 seconds, which is pretty high. He
was at 2.1 or 2.2 the first time.
Yeah,
around.
The first time was way low. But it's a middle of the pack kind of time.
Right.
But for him, it's slow. And more importantly, when you're dealing with an Aaron Donald, it's slow. If you're at 2.2, almost 2.6 seconds, that's giving Donald enough time to work. If you're at just over 2 seconds,
through his triple teams.
Right. If you're just over 2 seconds, that's probably not enough time for Donald to be an impact in the game. So this was the Rams secondary showing up in a way that they didn't the first time, in part because they had to keep Talib back, and that allowed their entire defensive front to play better.
Yeah.
So it's an example of how much even just one guy coming back doesn't just help out the secondary; it helps out everything, because it has this knock-on effect, this domino effect of, I will make the secondary better, which in turn will make the pass rush have a bigger impact in this game, And that's a huge thing, a huge part of what happened to Drew Brees and why he wasn't able to be as good as we've expected him to be.
The other part that's tough to quantify, because we've just started saying with quarterbacks, how many of their throws come on their first read and how many come on their next read, second, third, or fourth. And I know everybody's like, how do you know that? And we're just doing it based off of, did you start somewhere and did you move somewhere else? Even just in those generic terms, all second reads overall in the NFL are less effective than first reads. Because obviously, if it's your first read, it's gone well. You've made a decision. This is there.
This is open.
I'm going to make the throw. So that's where coverage comes in. If you can discourage the first read, you're almost automatically making the play less effective right off the bat over time. Just like as soon as you get pressure, passer rating drops 40%. But that's also, again, they do build off of each other.
And this is why defenses are so susceptible to double moves and why they look so stupid at times. You think, well, how can you fail? How can you be so bad at covering double moves? And it's because they want to sell out to shut down that first read, because if they do, it makes the second read less effective because you've made the quarterback change what he wants to do and go somewhere else. And B, it's buying time for your pass rush to become a factor in the play. So you want to take away that first thing, and you're therefore cheating towards that. And if you cheat towards that, that's when a double move screws you, because if you're playing the slant, as soon as you see a guy make his break on the slant, you can jump forward and you can attack that. But if you have to, well, I can't jump this because I have to make sure this isn't a slant and go. I have to make sure it's not a sluggo route, because if it is, I'm screwed. Like that's where the first read becomes open. They can consistently make that. So it's this balance, this juggling act between trying to be aggressive and shut down the first thing and making sure you're not doing it so much that you get hosed by a double move sometime.
That's where we talk about the run setting up the pass. Pass routes do set up the next pass route. And again, in the Patriots-Chiefs game, you've got Gronk on a fade, and then on that last 3rd and 10, he runs a slant. So that's if you overcommit to one thing, the other thing is open. In the Saints-Rams game, both run games were pretty much non-existent. 2.3 yards per carry for the Saints, including the Breeze kneel down, but still, about 2 yards a carry. Horrendous for the Saints. And the Rams didn't go anywhere either. 3 yards a carry, 26 carries for 77 yards. That includes a 16-yard end around or jet sweep to Josh Reynolds. Yeah. So there wasn't much going on in the ground. And I just want to give Jared Goff credit. He had the interception that was on Todd Gurley early in the game, and then he just kept making pretty big throws. Drops one in a bucket to Brandon Cooks. I think it was, late first half to put them in position at the end. They really needed that, making a few plays outside the pocket when he needed to. So Goff made a bunch of big plays, despite not having a run game.
He did. He stood up to be counted in a lot of big plays and was a big part of the reason they were able to cling on in this game. And eventually make the comeback. And you're right, it was without the run game to support him, and actually with Todd Gurley, previous MVP candidate, seemingly going out of his way to screw it up. But not just the dropped interception, but Todd Gurley blew blitz protection a couple of times, got him hit once, got him almost hit another time. Like, Gurley was at one point having as bad a game as it was possible to have, then ends up getting his touchdown on the ground, but
they were adamant that he was not hurt.
For the majority of the first half, he was playing as badly as it was possible for a running back to play. Redeemed himself slightly by scoring the touchdown on the ground, but he was having an awful game and then ended up basically getting benched for the second half.
Let's also the part of the reason why touchdown passes in single game samples or just small sample size in general are overrated. Multiple times yesterday, you saw big pass plays put teams inside the 5, and then they run it in. And it's like, all right, well, the 30-yard pass or the Goff pass to Brandon Cooks is the key play there. Don't completely change your perception of Goff just in case, just because he maybe throws a 1-yard touchdown and it changes his numbers and it changes the 5 key numbers of the stats that you look at. The big play was the Brandon Cooks play, and that sets up Gurley. It wasn't an easy touchdown by any means, but it sets up Gurley for the inside the 5-yard carry that leads to touchdowns.
Yeah. Honestly, I think what might have got Gurley sat down was the job he was doing in pass protection. Yeah. Because he was on the field for 32 snaps. 11 of those were pass blocking. So 11 of those he was kept in to help with the blitz. And on 2 of those, he screwed it up. Like 2 of those, one of them he got his quarterback hit. The other one he almost did. So 2 out of his 11 pass blocking snaps, he screwed up a blitz protection. And there's basically nothing that the NFL hates more than a running back screwing up blitz protection. It's why It's why you get these amazingly talented running backs that don't play as rookies or don't play on third downs as rookies, because they're not trusted to do that correctly.
Right.
And it's why when you get guys like Ezekiel Elliott playing an incredible amount right away, it's because they're able to do that. Ezekiel Elliott coming out, one of the most impressive parts of his game as a prospect was his pass blocking, was his ability to protect in a sort of pro-style system and pick up the blitz. So he played right away and played all the snaps. Guys that don't, and Gurley was one of them, he wasn't trusted to do that earlier in his career. That's a reason they don't see the field. So honestly, I think that might have been the reason he was sat down, is not just because he was having a bad game, but because he was screwing up blitz protection, and that's going to get your quarterback damaged, and that's going to lose you the game.
Yeah, you can't have that. Definitely not. Just to finish the story on Jared Goff, since weeks 13 to 15, where he was horrendous, game grades of 39, 46, and 47, which was the worst 3-game stretch of his career, including his rookie season, where he was pretty bad. He's got game grades now of 88, 84, 77, and 73, rounded up just a little bit. So those last 4 games, including the last 2 playoff games, much better. And, you know, if they're going to beat New England, they're going to need another really good game from Goff. That they'll go as well as far as he goes, as far as, you know, as far as that game goes.
Yeah.
What did I just say?
I'm not entirely sure.
A lot of different things.
Right. None of them appeared to be an English sentence. But
anything else you want to add about the NFC Championship here? Again, if we just can think about the drama for a second outside of the referee stuff, the fact that we went to overtime again. Right. The Rams handled the Saints' onslaught early on, crawled their way back into the game. The Rams' defense, I thought, did a nice job just keeping them in. Go to overtime. Greg Zuerlein, big kicks. It's in a dome, but big, long field goals that you have to hit.
One of which looked like it was leaking wide for a
that
serious portion of that kick. Looked like it was going to leak out to the right-hand side. And
it did. Everything completely changes if Zuerlein's not hitting those kicks. So, you know, the Rams, it was a full team effort there. Defense kept him in it. Goff made some key plays. We mentioned Dante Fowler in there. Zuerlein, fake punts, a lot of things working in the Rams' favor there.
Right. The other guy that I think deserves a mention at some point is Cameron Jordan for the Saints.
Yeah.
Who was turned in, well, he's turned into one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, period. Right? He has been dominant for multiple straight seasons now and has been a real part of the Saints defense being just good enough to get them going somewhere.
I always call him the most underrated player in the NFL because we've always said that he grades well, but I don't know if like people say Von Miller, Khalil Mack, nobody throws Cameron Jordan in that conversation.
Right. And I think a big part of that is, and we've said before, that when the Saints get somebody else on that defensive line having big games, they're a completely different unit. Because it's one thing for one guy to be really good all the time, but if one guy is all you've got, you can kind of take that away. Right. You can mitigate that. But when you get somebody else, it's a huge thing going forward. And the Saints, when they're at their best, have that second guy. They've had Sheldon Rankins at some time. He went down hurt. But Cameron Jordan's job over the past few seasons has been insane. So in terms of overall grade among defensive linemen over the past 3 seasons, just in the postseason, right? Number 1, Aaron Donald.
Just in the postseason?
Just in the postseason, because Cameron Jordan kicks it up in the postseason.
He's played, 3 postseason games?
But they've all been phenomenal. They've been insane. So he's actually played more than that. He's got 266 snaps over the past 3 seasons in the postseason, which is more than any of these people, by the way.
They played 2 last year and 2 this
year.
So
1, Aaron Donald. 2, Khalil Mack. Then we've got, on small sample size, Kenny Clark played really well for the Packers. That's got to be just
2016.
Alan Branch, randomly, for the Patriots on their run, when he was phenomenal. Then Cameron Jordan with this 88.6 grade, 3 batted passes, a ton of pressure. Negative plays. Failed pass rushes, as Booger would say.
Michael Brockers had a huge batted pass. One of the times Michael Thomas was open, Michael Brockers bats the pass. It saves a big gain.
Right.
It's actually a good play.
No, God, no. It's you failed.
Sorry, finish your Jordan thought. We'll wrap it up.
That's it, just that he's phenomenal. By the way, apparently, according to this, Chris Jones has 6 batted passes in the last 3 seasons in the playoffs alone.
Wow, he had a big one yesterday. And then he comes out injured, too, at the end. All right, so Rams are on to the Super Bowl. That was the first road championship game win since
for
2012.
5 years.
Yeah, 2012 was the last time it happened, and both road teams won. And again, we just saw that.
This was the
yesterday.
matchup we're getting in the Super Bowl was the least likely of all the potential permutations.
Right. Yeah, I mean they're the road teams. It has an effect. So yeah, was not expected. I was 0-2 in my picks.
I was 1-1.
Good job, Sam.